Welcome to the Worship Keys YouTube channel. My name is Carson Bruce. So glad you're here. We talk all things music theory, gear, industry, and ministry for your worship keys playing. If this episode is beneficial for you or you have any questions as you continue to watch, feel free to comment below, and I'd love to hear any feedback that you have along the way. So let's get into today's episode. Today is super special. I'm literally right here with Dru Pickens, and he's the keys player and MD player for We Are Messengers, and also been a worship leader and MD for other churches as well. Dru, welcome to the podcast, man.
Man, I'm so honored to be here. I've been watching your work, and I think this is so impactful. I really wish this was around when I was 18, just to get some information. Like, how do I do this? You know,
Right.
I think we get kind of wrapped up in like kind of seeing things and seeing the bigger platforms, and we're like, yeah, I want to be that, I want to do that, but no one says the how.
Right.
You know, and I think this is just so impactful, and it's going to be so purposeful for next generation, even for those who are serving now. So
Absolutely.
it's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you're watching on YouTube, you might see his hat. It says Kansas City.
Come on.
You're from Kansas City,
Kansas
man.
City Chiefs. Let's go,
Are you a
baby.
big Kansas City Chiefs
Oh,
football fan?
absolutely,
Yeah?
man. I've been around since the Tony Gonzalez days, Trent Green days, man. And Kansas City Chiefs, man, you know what? We have 3 now. So
That's crazy.
Let's keep it going, baby.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And you're married, living in Murfreesboro, which is outside of Nashville, and you have 2 daughters of your own.
Yep.
And
Nova and Haven. So Nova's a 6-year-old, and then Haven's our 3-year-old, and then my wife, man, I love her so much, Talise Pickens. And
That's sweet.
dude,
That's
yeah,
awesome, bro.
yeah, it's a blessing, man.
Well, we're glad to have you on the podcast. I know there are many people who've been following you on social media for some time, and people that know and love you personally. So you're playing with We Are Messengers right now, which has been around for a while. The lead guy, Darren Mulligan, is originally from Ireland. Right?
From Ireland.
I mean, can you speak a little bit about We Are Messengers, which I know we're not going to talk a ton about CCM World, but we know that it is very encouraging. Music and just tell us about being on the road and just being a part of We Are Messengers.
Yeah, man, you know, We Are Messengers, like we're such a curated group, and we're so intentional. And what you see on stage is so fueled by what's going on off stage. We actually have a great relationship with each other. We're really bonded, and it's a brotherhood, man. Ken and I, he's the drummer, and Thaddeus, guitar player, and Tanner is the bass player. And literally, we were just at the zoo together, you know, recently. And, you know, it's really one of those things to where like our families know of each other. Our daughters hang out with, you know, Ken and I's sons. I want to say, you know, if the musician out there who wants like a longevity type of, you know, gig or whatever you want to call it, I want to say you should look for these things rather than the performance of it all, because no one wants to play with people they don't like.
Right, right.
Exactly. You know, it's one of those things. It's like, you know, once you have that bond, once you have that brotherhood, you can have the hard conversations. Even when you're on the bus, it's just like, you know, we're playing video games, you know, throwing popcorn at each other. And if you're going to do live together, why fake that, you know?
That's good.
And so Darren, we talk almost every week, you know, and we just, you know, call each other and just check on each other. We have a group message, you know, so it's very wholesome and very genuine, very real, alongside of the, you know, the performance side of it. I look forward to just being on the bus with those guys, and just like I said, going to the zoo, you know, or just eating avocado toast, you know, just stuff like that. And if you see on our tours, man, you'll see that a lot of mornings we're just, you know, having Bible study, you know, in the mornings, and it's just an organic environment. And I think that should be the standard, man. You know, I think that should be I think that's okay to say. The Lord is really moving in those shows, man. I mean, it's actually one of the bands that I've been with, or that I've even seen, that actually has like, you know, altar calls during the concerts. And you know, why not offer Jesus? Why not open up the floor to say, hey, if anyone wants to, you know, accept Christ, come now.
Wow.
I mean, this is what we're here for.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
and so it's so impactful, man. Darren is so genuine, and his heart is so big, man. I love serving with those guys.
That's
man.
so great to hear. And I know it's not always the case that you can be so close in an entertainment type setting, even in the CCM world. And so that's really cool that your experience is like that, man.
Yeah.
It's really good to hear your heart behind that. And today's episode is all about how to be a great MD. So we're going to like dive into that. But before we do, I do want to just kind of take us back into your childhood a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
But, from Kansas City, you learned from your aunt who's
yeah.
in New York, right? Can you tell us a little bit of how you grew to love the piano, learn the piano, develop your ear? Tell us a little bit about that.
Man, when they say it's, certain people have a natural gift or a natural thing, that's kind of what she saw in me, actually, when I was 9 years old. Like I said, we were in a setting like this, like a small house, just a family dinner, and she goes over to the piano and starts to play Heart and Soul, and I instantly picked up on it, and she was like, oh my goodness, this 9-year-old can play, and that's he has an ear, he has the rhythm, and we're just kind of playing the piano, for hours. And my parents are there and my cousins are there just kind of hanging out watching. Moments like that, like vividly, I remember how the kitchen smelled. I remember things that were on the floor. The piano was not nearby this clean. It was just like things, just sitting on top of it, like little records and newspapers and dust everywhere. And I remember very vividly that moment, and something kind of just resonated. And she became a mentor to me from then on. So she introduced me to Broadway. She's from New York. Introduced me to being in the pit, with the conductors and all that.
How old were you when you were in the pit watching that?
I was 15 years old.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people have that experience. That's really cool.
I mean, and my auntie, she has a huge resume of, being a stage manager, stage production on Broadway. Yeah. She's been an assistant for many artists back in the day and did a lot of film things. I remember just being in New York, and we were watching Motown, and in Motown back in the day, you were doing like Temptations, Michael Jackson, like all these, soulful pop artists on Broadway. And Joseph Gerbet, he was the conductor back then, and I just remember seeing him like go at it, man. And I'm like this is what I want to do. And you just feel that, it's like, man, it resonates so much. It's like this is like a calling thing,
Absolutely.
And I just clung on to that, man. And then we'll go to her house, and I'm just asking questions. So how long did you do this? Or how do you read? Or how just going in and it's probably overwhelming to her, but she's like, when you're in New York, and you have someone who wants to be a part of the arts, it's not really like this thing of like, I'm tired of this. It's like, no, like this is life for us,
right.
And so when you're in New York, you have Manhattan School of Music, and you have all of those other colleges that are just specifically for the arts. And so when you find someone in your family, it's like, hey, come here, let me show you what it is, And so her heart was so big in that area. So started off just, in that environment, Broadway and orchestration. And actually what's crazy is I was kind of being mentored by two people at one time, in a way. My uncle, Cortez Vine, I talk about him a lot. He was actually teaching me the worship side of things while I was kind of learning the Broadway things at the same time.
That's so cool.
And it was just one of those things. And I'm a church kid. My mom's, she was a evangelist and missionary. My dad was a deacon as well, and so we grew up in church, and church was our thing. Like that's what we did, and so that was already kind of built in, So going to church every day, not just Sunday. Every day, that was kind of built in, Right. And so, and watching my uncle Cortez Vine, my parents, I'm really appreciative because they allowed me to really kind of sit under him. And when I say sit, I mean like go to the church and kind of just watch him. And I pretty much live with him as well, just one of those, like I said, when music is, and when it's your thing, that's all you want to be around,
right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
you might not mention it, but your uncle Cortez Vine has an incredible song called "You Deserve It." If you're in any of that genre of music, that song. When you mentioned that, I was like, man, that's a great song. I know so many
that's
churches.
My uncle. He's
that,
featuring on that song, Bishop Cortez Vine. So when you hear that song, you hear him. Yeah, that's my family, and he's an awesome worship leader. He just gets it, and it's not just about like him singing, but he gets the flow and he gets the scripture behind it.
That's important. Yeah.
Teaching me keys and what goes where and what's relative and how to switch from like prophetic to worship and then worship to praise. I learned all of that by watching him. And I will never take that for granted because, like I said, those two worlds is what kind of shaped, how I produce, how I arrange, all of that is what makes me who I am today.
Right.
And so I served with him for many years. And what's crazy is I'll go back to Kansas City and I'll call him, or he'll call me and say, hey, you're in town? Hey, we got prayer night tonight, hop on the keys.
Awesome.
I'm like, what's the set list? He's like, I don't know. We're gonna figure it out when we get there. And we have that bond, but I still talk to both of them. And yeah, man.
That's so important, because it's so important for everyone to hear that, it's easy to say, I'm playing with We Are Messengers, or I'm playing with, Riley Clemens, or whoever it is right now. But like when you were 9, 10, 11, 15, 16, 17, what were you doing then? And it's important for people to know, like, not to neglect or overlook the small beginnings when you're a kid, when you're a teenager.
Yeah. I mean, it builds you, man. And even from a mechanic standpoint, it shapes your ear. I don't think we talk about this a lot, but I think a lot of musicians have like this catalog of creativity and music that they kind of pull from. So when you're talking about arrangements, when you're talking about, trying to, creative and put things together, well, a lot of your like kind of like tastefulness and your palette for music comes from those younger years.
Yes.
And what your parents allowed you to listen to. Right. Because a lot of times what's crazy, it's not that you don't like certain music out there. It's just that you didn't grow up listening to that, Yeah. And so it's like, man, when you talk about listening to Thelonious Monk, that just sounds so busy, it's like, oh, jazz is just so, but it's like when you grow up listening to that, that's kind of like your palette for your catalog of creativity, I think even as musicians, like, we should definitely like just broaden our catalogs, and so that creativity will be able to continue to flow.
That's good.
And when we're talking about arranging and how I arrange things, man, I listen to, this is kind of like going to another, subject here, but when you're talking about arranging and we're talking about composing, I listen to a lot of soundtracks still to this day. So I was actually listening to Lion King on the way here, which is funny. And then I was also listening to Prince of Egypt.
Man, what a great movie.
Dude, like, I mean, it's so good, right? Just the scoring on that's my catalog, and then I'll listen to Stevie Wonder the next day,
there you go. Right.
Or I'll listen to, just, something else. But.
And as an MD, that helps you, because when you're being creative in church or, on stage in CCM, but, in church, having that big catalog to pull from in all genres too.
In all genres. Yeah. And then honestly, like, of course there are some boundaries with that, because you don't want to like start playing Beyonce during the worship moment, right? We're not going to do that,
I want to sing a list.
Yeah. Right. It's like, no, bro, you're going to get fired for that. But however, like, things that are of course organic and pure, and like, so you have music out there that's just inspiring, and it's about love, and it's about, the message is pure for you to kind of have a foundation saying, hey, I'm going to pull from this to generate some creativity. I think there's a balance to that, of course, when you're trying to implement both worlds or collide both worlds. But yeah, like for the younger musician out there, don't just listen to just one thing. I love Bethel. I love Hillsong. We were just in Australia recently, and I love being there, with the Hillsong fam. And I love everything they do, but when it comes to creativity and when it comes to trying to have your own identity, you have to have something to draw from. And that catalog of just records, Beastie Boys and the Beatles and Prince and just whatever, like you have to kind of, have that,
Right.
So
yeah, man.
I think that's okay, man.
Absolutely. That's great.
Yeah.
We're going to jump into some questions here, man.
Sure, yeah.
For you.
Yeah.
So talking all things MD. So first of all, if you're in the keys world, MD is music director, stands for music director.
Yeah.
Maybe you're in a church and you don't really have an MD position. Can you just define what an MD is and kind of differentiate that from like the worship leader or pastor and the MD? Can you tell us what that role is?
Yeah. The MD is all about kind of bringing to life the vision of the worship leader, and the worship leader is bringing to life the vision of the pastor or the leader, in my opinion.
Right.
When I was worship pastoring, I would be in those meetings with the worship pastor or with pastor. And also what's funny is I also wore the MD hat, but I'll also have someone as well kind of assisting me with that role as well. As a music director, you get kind of your instruction, from the worship director, worship pastor, say, hey, this is what we're going to do, and then your job as a music director is to make sure there's a cohesiveness for sure. Like, and we can talk about, scheduling, band rehearsals and all of that. We can dive into that. But the overall picture of an MD is making sure everything is cohesive. You guys are on the same page. And even if you're going to change an arrangement, even if you're going to shorten something or change your chord progression, doesn't matter. You just want to make sure you guys are on the same page and there's a cohesiveness about it. Music directing and also even like spontaneity stuff, you want to make sure you're always 5 steps ahead of the game, kind of like making sure that you're watching the worship director in real time and making sure that you're, like I said, directing the band in real time on where we're going, how we're going to get there, when we're going to stop, when we're going to end, transitions, whether there's something that we're just going to stop playing, like it's your job to direct that moment. And then also preparation, which of course we could still talk about that, rehearsals or how long rehearsals should go, or hey, y'all, we need to do this one more time. We need to run this one more time. It's just not clean enough. I'm a perfectionist. I think that we should come to church with our best. Like I genuinely believe that, and I think the Lord can operate through structure 100%. But let's make sure like things are clean, things are tight. Make sure that snare is not too poppy. Just certain songs need a mid to low snare. And so just those specific things, making sure the bass is not, there's not too much distort. But just the cohesiveness really is really what you want to focus in on.
That's good.
Yeah.
I want to get into some questions that some people have submitted.
Okay, great.
To me, which is great. It's crazy that people are like submitting questions.
That's awesome.
Us to talk about. So one question that Milton is his name, is his Instagram handle, the Milton Torres. I think that's how you pronounce your last name, Milton. But thanks for weighing in and just submitting a question. But basically, he was asking, how does the leadership of the worship pastor or worship leader affect the whole band and the MD? Because I don't know if you can share any stories or shed any light on this, because when you're not in sync with each other, how difficult it can be. How important is that leadership from the pastor down to the worship leader, pastor to the MD, and how can that affect your band?
This is very, very intentional. Division always divides, no matter what.
Right.
And when I say that, if the worship leader is not in tune with the vision of the pastor, and the pastor is saying we want to have a gospel culture, right? We're going to do some of the Ty Tribbett stuff. We're going to do some of the Fred Hammond stuff. Then the worship leader's like, I don't really sing like that. I would rather stick on the Carrie Job side. What there's already tension there, right?
Right.
Same thing that works from the worship leader to the MD. Where the worship leader's like, hey, can we implement some, Fred Hammond stuff? Can we, and then the keys player is like, man, like I don't really want to like learn those type of chords. What I'm saying? I just kind of want to keep it simple. There's going to be tension there.
Right.
And so you always want to like, and I believe that the Lord is also present in the hiring process as well.
Yes.
And I think the Lord is just, I want to say, and from my heart, he cares just as much about the preparation, just as much as you care about the performance. And I say that so intentionally because it does affect everybody, man. If you can't get along with the worship pastor, and they have a completely different vision, my opinion is maybe that is not the position for one of y'all to move forward in, because the people are affected by that, and the people can feel division on stage, and they can feel when the worship leader's like, "Hey, break." And you're like, no, man, we going to keep driving this.
Ooh,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and we're seeing this on stage. I've been in the audience. It's like, man, something's not right. Yeah. And so we have to kill our pride and say, hey, like, you're great at what you do. I love what I do, but maybe this is just not the position for me because it's too important. There are souls out there. We have to create an atmosphere for the word to be given. If there is tension there, always, of course, have that conversation with another leader involved, right? In the same room, and say, hey, what are we going to do here? Like, or what's the game plan? Right. Or what's the overall vision from an MD standpoint to a worship leader standpoint? Do you want CCM and gospel, or do you like hymns as well? And I think that's okay.
Yeah.
You are a team. Right. Everyone don't have the same skill set levels as well. So, you'll have a worship leader who can't really drive a gospel song.
Right.
Or you'll have a gospel worship leader and a musician can't really drive a gospel song,
Right.
And that is okay. And also, it may be an opportunity for you to kind of step your game up as a musician.
Right.
I was in a lot of positions to where I did not know how to play in every key. The G does not always feel right, or a D don't always feel right as maybe an A flat, does,
Right.
And because I was like in that position, and this was the vision of the church to have these gospel moments, if I'm going to accept this position, I got to step my game up and learn some of this stuff, if you really have a heart for it. But if you don't have a heart for it, it's okay to be like, hey, I would rather you use me in another capacity. Or when there's a worship moment, when there's a Sunday that's just for Bethel, a Bethel set list. Or, hey, can you schedule me for this? Right. This is where I'm comfortable at.
Absolutely.
And I think that works. I think the Lord operates in that.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
What do you say for people who maybe are struggling with their own insecurities? Because I feel like a lot of the tension, sometimes it's preference, sometimes it's skill sets that you may or may not have. But what happens when insecurities creep into worship leaders and MDs? Because that word that you mentioned earlier, pride, is a big thing, especially within music. Yeah. Can you speak on insecurities and how that can flesh out, whether that is CCM or church world? It can definitely still happen in church world as well, not just like industry stuff. Like, can you speak on those insecurities?
Insecurities sometimes come from, I want to say, the wrong motive sometimes. And I've experienced that myself, where it's like, I want to do a great job. Me wanting to do a great job sometimes does not equal God wanting to use me in that moment.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? This is in my key. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is my song. I practice this in the shower, bro. I'm ready. And like, the Lord doesn't want to use you in that area. He wants to use you in another area. Insecurity is sometimes not even, I want to say, like, we focus the negative side on insecurities. And sometimes it's just uncomfortable. I'm just insecure because I don't know how, not because there's a negative, like I'm anxious or whatever, or afraid of embarrassment. It's just a lack of knowledge in a certain area that makes me insecure,
yes.
And so therefore it's like, okay, Lord, use me in my insecurities. There's been so many, for me, like the things that I don't want to do, I've seen the Lord use me in that area. It's like, this ain't me, you know what I'm saying? I didn't start off leading praise and worship. Like that was never my thing. Like, I never wanted to be on stage. But then my uncle was like, hey, I'm out this week. You got it. And it's like, wait, hold on. Like, no, wait, bro. This ain't
I'm not ready yet. Hold on.
This ain't the Lord telling you this, bro. And in that insecure moment, the Lord pulled something out of me. It was like, hey, like, I've called you to do this, Yeah. And then the other side of insecurity, a lot of times it is that moment where you need to use that moment to also get the knowledge. I'm on both sides. I'm a touring musician, and I'm also, so it's like, okay, if I'm insecure in the area, maybe I need to go home and I need to practice this. That's just what it is. If you're going to do this, if you're going to be a touring musician, from that standpoint, this may be a time where you need to go to the drawing board, learn your skills.
For sure.
Learn this in every key, all the things, so that therefore that it's insecurity. Sometimes it's a lack of preparation as well, and prepare yourself, and I think that's okay to say that as well, and preparation, lack of preparation will always bring about insecurities.
For sure. That'll preach right there.
Bro, it just does, man.
The sermon right there.
Dude, for real, man. So there's two sides to that. From a worship leading standpoint, being insecure sometimes is the way the Lord needs in.
Yeah, absolutely, dude.
Yep.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
So let's talk about the band cohesiveness, so to speak, and just that team aspect. And so being the MD, the music director, there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of set list and arranging and music theory and encouragement to band members. Can you speak on how to encourage band members, how to prepare them? Because first and foremost, the band members have to respect the MD, because you are leading them. And if they
Yeah.
don't respect you, or they don't think you have the skill set, or they don't think you know what you're talking about, they're really just not going to listen to you. They're just going to do their own thing. And I don't know if you've ever experienced that. But an MD can be the drummer, the bassist, the electric, the keys player. You're a keys player.
Yeah.
You probably play other instruments, but that's mainly, you mainly play keys.
Yeah.
And so we're talking, of course, from the keys perspective, but it really could be any instrument. Can you speak into how important it is to be on the same page with your band members, and what it might look like when they're not on the same page?
So I assess the skill set of each band member, and I start off there. And the reason why is because now I know how far I can push them.
Yeah.
And it creates a lot of tension when you're trying to force something from a musician that they don't even want to go to or be a part of.
Yes.
It's like, hey, like if you have a guitar player who all he knows how to play is acoustic, he doesn't know how to play really electric type of vibes, strengthen him in that area, Of course, you can ask him, hey, are you looking forward to kind of like expanding like your playing ability? He's like, no, I like acoustic, Okay, fine. I think that's so intentional when it comes to leading first.
Yeah.
Because now everyone feels like they are making an impact.
Yes.
Which is so important.
Right.
You never want anyone to feel like, oh, I'm the weakest link of this unit.
That's good. Say that again, man.
You never want anyone to feel like they're the weakest link of the unit.
That's good.
Because it always creates this like tension, and they're like, oh, it's taking me a long time in rehearsal. Everybody else got it. When you're scheduling out your people, you're scheduling out your band, if you have a different variety of units in your church, it's okay to assess and say, hey, this drummer belongs here with this guitar player. Right. This keys player for this set list for this week belongs with this bass player, because I know their skill set. Absolutely. And I know their skill level, and they can handle this. And even from there, they'll be able to create what they love to be a part of.
Right.
And then their creativity comes out, the arranging comes out, because they feel wanted and they feel valued. And that is very important. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, like with the We Are Messengers thing, incentives and what you do outside of the church fuels for what you do inside of the church.
Yes, sir.
And it's so important, because you can't just hit up your staff on Thursday and say, hey, here's the set list, see y'all Sunday. You can't do that. Like they have to have a relationship with you. I worked in hotels for many years. I did assistant general manager work at the Hyatt Hilton properties.
Oh, cool, man.
And so anytime I was to schedule people for that day at the front desk, I know who gets along with who. I know on a Sunday morning, if it's a busy Sunday, I know this is my guy who's going to be able to do everything quick and everything organized. Everything's going to be good. Right. He's going to be able to work with her because they talk to each other. All these things,
Right.
And that is kind of like my basis of how I schedule and how I put people together. And therefore, you're able to work a little bit, better with each other. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, especially the relational aspect of that, especially within churches, because it's all about relationships.
It's all about relationships.
With God first, right?
Absolutely,
and
man.
It's not, religion is just not, it's not a bunch of rules, right? It's about relationship and
absolutely.
with each other for sure. I'm going to get out some other questions as well, man. You've been on staff at churches before, just so people know that you're not just a touring musician who's just,
this is
learning
12
the part.
years of worship directing. Probably a little bit longer than that, man. Of MDing and being a worship pastor, like it's a lot of experiences. I mean, that's what I did before I started touring, as a full-time musician, and that's kind of the roots, So
and managing people is such a big thing. Like communication and learning how to respect and really love on people is so huge. So with the kind of management position of people, managing the stage, directing the music. How do you balance directing paid versus volunteer musicians?
Let's start off first with, you have expectations and you have incentives. And these are kind of like your driving forces for me, I'll say, which I've seen. With paid musicians, there are expectations. And I want to say that because they set the standard of the volunteers. Very simple. If you are a drummer and your sticks are everywhere after service, well, the volunteer is probably going to do that next week. If you come to church and you're a singer and you're leaving your empty water bottles on stage, well, the volunteer is probably going to do that too, just because they see like, oh, they don't really care,
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So holding your paid musicians to a higher expectation actually makes your life easier, because you're like, hey, I'm setting the standard. Hey, this is the conversation that we're having. Hey, you may have to be here a little bit longer. Like these conversations up front. Hey, there may be outside services that I may call you for. Hey, I'm letting you know I probably will call you a little bit more outside of church, because things are subject to change. If I'm talking to pastor, and then he changes the set list on a Saturday night, I'm going to call you.
Right.
I promise you I am. I'm going to call you Saturday night and say, hey. So having that expectation with a paid musician, and also don't get me wrong, like for volunteers, and we'll get there for sure. For volunteers, I'm not expecting you to really be that person who's hearing the vision of the pastor too much. I'm not expecting that out of you.
Right.
That's great. That's a plus. And to hear the vision of the church and our core values and all that, that's great. Please, everyone, please, that doesn't excuse that. However, for paid musicians, I feel like you are a part of the thread, or you are the driving force to making sure these things the vision is being put into real time. And then also the expectations for sure. And then incentives. So when I say that, I'm saying, hey, like, this is what I did at my most recent church. I would throw like a barbecue, or something like that, for the incentive, just saying, hey, thank you.
Right.
Yeah, of course you're not getting paid, but hey, we're going out bowling tonight. Don't bring any money. Of course, these things are coming from the support of the church and however that works.
Right.
Being able to like budget with whoever chief of staff, whoever and say, hey, like every year I want to do at least 3 events for my volunteers. Just to say, hey, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for your time. This is opposite from a dream team meeting.
Right.
Because dream team is sometimes like, hey, we're still focused on the vision. We're still focused. This is still kind of work, but this is different as far as saying, hey, I appreciate you. Let's just hang out. And that keeps the morale. Of course, you want everyone to say, hey, we're here to serve, but everyone doesn't always think that way. Some people are leaving work early to come to rehearsal. Right. Some people are having to find babysitters. I was one of those where I'm literally leaving my 9-to-5 job and then I'm coming right to rehearsal at 6:30.
Yeah.
And so it's like, man, I'm a little burnt out.
Right.
But next week we get to go to main event and hang out, and I feel appreciated. Great. So managing paid versus volunteer. With volunteers, always think of incentives. Always think of things just to keep keep the morale there. And then even with paid musicians, still incentives. Because I remember being a paid musician, it's like, okay, I'm being a little overworked here, because you will feel like that. That is the real. You will feel kind of overworked. However, your posture should always be, I'm here to serve, no matter what, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also times like, man, I'm a little burnt out, and that's just a natural thing, but also incentives to say, hey, man, I know you're on salary here, but dude, like, let me just grab you some coffee, man. Let's just hang out, bro. Let's just like go to a movie. Let's chill, Yeah. So when it comes to managing, of course, it's a little bit different, but forwardness with paid musicians have to come to the meetings, because you set the standard. And honestly, when you set the standard, even as a musician, and when you're not there the next Sunday, you're not stressing about what's going on at church, because the standard is set. You can go on your vacation, or you can miss this Sunday or whatever, because you've already set the tone. You already have the patches. You're like, hey, push patch 1, this is your drone effect. Absolutely. This is your synth effect, and so the standard being set gives you actually a breath of fresh air to say, I get to come back to church without someone throwing a grenade. So, yeah.
That's good, man. So I've been a part of a lot of churches where they have paid musicians, and then some churches where they don't have any paid musicians, and then just kind of some churches that have like a hybrid thing. I know a lot of churches, it's the case where they really don't have a lot of electric guitarists, so they're going to pay this guy to come play the electric guitar. They don't really have an organist or a keys player, so they'll pay that one particular spot or whatever, and then volunteers will fill in the gap. But especially singers, because I feel like everyone wants to come sing on stage, right? So I feel like, there's a lot of people in the congregation who will volunteer to come sing a lot more than just play the instrument. What do you do? Can you speak on, kind of balancing the feelings, insecurities, almost maybe even jealousy, maybe even some frustration when there's a musician who is getting paid and someone who is not getting paid, and maybe they might be,
same equal
like work. Effort and skill level. Like, what would you say to that?
No, that's really hard because actually a lot of singers are actually not getting compensated, and sometimes those singers are there every week just as much as the musicians are. And I can say this confidently: even when I was back in Kansas City, most musicians really want to do that for a living.
Right.
And not to say vocalists don't. But a lot of vocalists, they're just like, I can sing, and I'm good at what I do, but I don't really want to do this for a living, And sometimes that little detail really does kind of matter, because that musician sometimes is looking like, okay, if I can do this, I may be able to quit my job and really just focus on the church. And a lot of times with musicians, like, they're carrying gear, and then it's sometimes their keyboard that they probably spent $3,000 on. Right. Like there are sometimes, and I'm not saying this doesn't happen with vocalists, but sometimes musicians, they went to school for what they do. And there are a lot of things that kind of like offset, but dude, like when it comes to singers, I don't know really what created that. However, I do also know that there are always a lot more singers than there are musicians. Most churches, you probably, and I'll say even smaller churches, you have like 3 musicians, but you have 8 BGVs on stage. Right. So how are we going to pay all y'all $150?
Right, exactly.
And so it's one of those things. But then we go back to incentives, right? To where, hey, there's no budget to pay, and actually, what's crazy is you have Nashville, you have Chicago, you have LA, where there's a plethora of musicians, right? Well, these smaller towns, you don't really have a lot of musicians like that. If you really think about it, like in Kansas City, I probably know about 8 keyboard players who can really like hold it down from a standpoint of gospel and CCM. There's more singers most of the time than there are musicians.
Right.
And so that being said, like, you are paying that musician because there is a like higher demand because there is not a plethora of musicians in that town.
Right.
Hey, I'm paying him because there's only 8 guys here in the whole city who can play. So we're paying him because we really need, kind of from a business standpoint, we kind of need him to be here, most of the time, and from a full-time standpoint, you know. Nashville, when I came here, everyone volunteers. Most people volunteer in Nashville because there are thousands of musicians here.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so when you think of it like that, you come to a town like this and it's like, oh, no one's for real getting paid. It kind of makes your mind like, oh, but when you go to a smaller town, it's like, oh, this is why they're paying the musician because he's the only guy in town.
Right.
And before the 1,000, 10,000 seater, church gets him, we would love to keep him here. Because everything's going great, so just that little small detail, there's a lot of things that's kind of working behind the scenes to keep that musician there who also, like I said, and dude, it is so hard as well. I mean, let me know if I'm worried about it, but it's so hard to find musicians who also want to be sons of the ministry.
Talk about that, because so many paid musicians want to come in, do the good enough job and get the paycheck and leave.
Bro.
What do you speak on that? Or people that will play and just go back to the back room or whatever, won't even listen to the sermon, won't even connect. How do you like bring them in? You can't make anyone do anything, right?
Dude,
but how do you
that's how come sometimes the musicians are the ones that per se will get the check, because it is such a curated position. Like I said, with a singer, it's really not that curated. We want you to be a part of it, all the things, but with a musician to say, hey, do we like pastor will really like for you to travel with him because you are a son of the church. That is a very close position with the pastor as well, because you can have a musician up there who just don't care, and that happens so often, and so the frustrating part of that, when I say a son of the church, I mean like, dude, like you're gonna serve no matter what at any capacity, like your heart is the vision. Good. and you will call the pastor and say, hey, is there anything I can do? Any playing style or anything you want me to listen to that, or what can I pray for this week? Hey, let's just go to the church and like, let's just cultivate this thing. Let's just come to church on a Monday night and how about you pray over my hands? That's the son right there.
Wow. Yeah.
To say, hey, pastor, like, I know I can do this. I know I can play jazz. I know whatever, but I really want to be a part of this. I want you to anoint me, and not only that, I want you to also be a mentor outside of this. Saying, hey, I want you to call and I want you to check up on me. I also, men need mentors, man, and even women musicians, you need mentors, and allowing your pastor to pastor you is completely different than you just playing on a Sunday morning. Totally two different things, because the blessing does not come in a check. When you're a son of the house, the blessing there's no form of money that could top notch what you can receive as a son of the house.
That's good.
And so we should long for that within the church, because man, like there's been times where like me and my wife, like we're not having a good season, and I had to call my pastor and be like, hey, what's your advice? Hey, let's and like that's the son right there, Hey, or my wife would have to call, the woman first lady, whatever you want to call her, and say, hey, how do I handle this?
Right.
We're not even talking about music right now. We're talking about just basic life things, being able to just receive correction. I do my pastor at Lifegate Church, Pastor Brian Gallardo. I was just with him last week. You will see me, wherever, all over the world, whatever. But I will allow him to call me and he'll say, hey, like that wasn't right. Hey, take that post down, bro. Like that's, and
that's important.
And it's like, yes, sir. Like it's so important to have a spiritual father. I was just sitting on his couch last week and he's just like, pouring into me,
Wow. Gotta have those people.
Gotta have those people, man. And I would do anything for him, for free. He has a few gigs, not gigs, but preaching engagements coming up. Yeah. And I told him, I said, hey, call me, I'll come serve, whatever, because of the wisdom and the guidance. And I also feel covered, even though I'm the man of my house. And I also still feel covered when I go out to these places, because I know I have a spiritual father praying for me while I'm out there, you know?
Yeah.
And he's out there texting me and saying, hey, you're doing a good job. Keep going. Hey, take care of your family. Make sure you go home this week. Like every musician, it is so wise for you to be a son of the house, because you need a covering out here. As a musician, man, you really do. People will use you. You'll go through life, and just like, hey, why am I so lonely? I'm a full-time musician now. I'm sitting here, doing what I love, but there's an emptiness here. What is that? Well, it's probably because you're not a son of the house.
Wow.
And that gift goes way. It's an investment, man. I honestly believe that, me coming to Nashville, man, and how peaceful the journey has been and how God has just, man, blessed our family is because I'm a son of the house, man. Still.
That's good.
Still.
That's really good.
Kansas City I'm 9 hours away, but I still talk to my pastor every week.
That's important, man. Cool.
And yeah.
So good. What kind of tips can you give directly to an MD at a church, music director at a church, who is directing a team that are like the top-notch advice, like, hey, do these one or two things, and that'll really set you up for success?
For an MD standpoint, even from a worship leader standpoint, worship pastor standpoint, it's all about leaving that day with one thought. When you're talking with your pastor, whoever it is, saying, hey, what is the thought for today? If people were to leave today, the church service or whatever, you're like, what is the thought? When you're picking out your set list, let's not have too many subjects going on,
Right.
From a worship leader to an MD, you wear the same hat.
Yes.
Because there are moments that you create as an MD that also reflects the title and the message and the thought. When you really go into detail of that, what part of the song are we going to uplift? What part of the song as an MD should we kind of allow the lyric to speak? Because there are certain songs to where we can overcrowd things, and it's like, no, this part needs to be declared. So let's kind of like allow the Lord to move in this part. So it's all about the intentionality of what's being portrayed, what's being said, and in that moment as an MD, you're able to complement the right things at the right time.
That's good.
And even from a creativity standpoint, I've heard so many songs where the intro has nothing to do, from an arrangement standpoint.
Yeah, you're like,
it's
why?
like, where are we going with this? It's great. It sounds great. But like we're starting on this like minor thing.
Right.
And then like all of a sudden the song is like, the verse 1 is like, it's like, what are we doing? Like I'm
take us on a roller coaster.
Yeah,
of emotions.
I'm mixed in emotions here, And so as an MD, from that standpoint, you want to complement the moment and also the message. That's what you want to think about.
Eminem.
Yeah, Eminem, dude. That's great, dude. The moment and the message. That's what I'm thinking about. The moment and the message. What parts need a moment? And what parts of the song just need the message to let it do the work?
That is great. That is great. And that will drive how you create set lists, right?
Oh, for sure.
That will drive how you dynamically do your music.
Yeah, man. Eminem, bro.
Eminem.
Moment and message, bro. I think you're always up for success in that area, man. With your creativity, with your rehearsals. God is also involved in the preparation.
That's good.
Just as much as he's involved in what goes on Sunday morning when you turn those lights on.
That's good.
And pray about it, Lord, what's going on? What is being said in this song?
Yes.
Pastor's talking about love. If you have to set this out, and I keep hearing love. All right, well, let's make something right here. Music, if it's done the right way, you will be able to repeat a certain part, and that's in your spirit.
Yes.
If it's done the right way,
right.
And that's where it comes even from a worship leader standpoint. Change those arrangements sometimes. You can mix up those sequences because we want to leave here with one thought.
How do you, so many churches will prepare, they have click tracks or whatever, and they have like these arrangements that they've done for so many, weeks or months or years, with these certain songs, and they've done it a certain way. How do you move past just a song list? How do you, as an MD, prepare your band to maybe have a moment? Because I know I've been in rehearsals where like we've had a moment during rehearsal, and it was just for rehearsal, and it's like, wow, it's so crazy. And sometimes then when you get to the service,
it don't happen like that.
It's like, and especially like if you're in a church that does like 2 or 3 services, sometimes like a service might be different than the other, and you're like, wow, that first service was actually like a lot better.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, I've seen so many churches that just grieves my heart because so many times they go through all the songs, and man, it might sound incredible. Production might be great. I mean, tones are dialed in, things are dialed in. But how do you like create the space to be like, hey, we may have a moment at any point of this song, and it doesn't have to be the 3rd or 4th song.
Dude, sure, yeah.
Speak on that, man.
Yeah, and this is why, like for me, like the whole tracks thing and the staying on the grid thing, I get it because, a lot of churches are timed and all that. And so from a technical standpoint, this is definitely something that I didn't come from that, bro. When I was growing up, dude, we had wedges, man. There was no click track.
Right.
There was just tamarines, organ, keys. But to speak to that, you had a lot more room to hold everything with a loose grip. It's so important because like the Lord's personality is the same, but he always changes, like he's always uses different moments in time. Right. The Lord is still the Lord. However, he doesn't, function the same way every time or
right,
every
that's good.
It's not going to be that every time, especially when you have different subjects. When you're talking about chains being broken, there's a whole process for freedom. Sometimes you have someone who in the congregation that needs to chant that over and over and over again. And that's one of those Sundays where you're like, hey, like I'm hearing from pastor, I'm hearing from our worship leader that this may be one of those services to where like, and even if it doesn't happen that way, it's still fine because remember, like we're serving, right? So this may be one of those services where this may go off the grid a little bit because of the message that's being spoken. This may have to be declared, let's just prepare, like we rehearsed, whatever. But if I have to stop the click track this week, prepare for that. When it comes to tracks, man, it's one of those things to where
Do you use tracks for We Are Messengers?
So yes. However, the tracks for us, we're not dependent on them. They actually complement what we're doing.
Right, that's good.
It's a difference when you are dependent on tracks and when tracks just support you.
That's good, yeah. Yeah.
And so that's where it comes from, that insecurity place we're talking about as far as preparation.
Yeah.
Even if tracks go down, we can still hold this down, A lot of times I like to just have perk and tracks.
Absolutely.
And just like we play this thing organically. I'm so overstimulated as a musician anyway. I do like, and I hate to say that, but the lights, the smoke machines, there's nothing wrong with it. But this is my everyday life.
Right.
So when I come to church, you
don't want that, right?
Let's strip this thing back, bro.
Yes.
Let's just have perk and click and let's just go.
Yeah.
And so, but this is also where I love Ableton. I work through Ableton as well.
Right.
And so this is also where you set yourself up for success, where you have markers. You're able to recycle through another chorus. You have a hot key where you can say, hey, okay, we're going back to this vamp. 1, 2, 3, boom. And so in those instances to where like you may have this issue or not even an issue where it's like, hey y'all, just hold everything with open. We may do this 3 times. In rehearsal, we only did it once. But as an MD, this is where you come in which that expectation comes in from, right? Where you have Ableton set up, I'm just speaking from Ableton, where you can, hit a hotkey, whatever, and then go back to that chorus, loop it again, or you just have a perk, 8 bar of perk or whatever, and you can just go to the perk and we're just gonna create stuff right here.
That's good.
Let's just loop this, So when it comes to tracks, create your grid, create your session to where you can play around with the sequences no matter what in real time. So therefore, when there's creativity that needs to be going on or when there's a repeated sequence, you're ready. I love it when it's just not so much in the tracks to where we can still kind of go off grid or whatever.
That's good. And when you have a band that's a full band,
dude. Like actually, most cats that I know who love to play, they're like, dude, let's get rid of these tracks, dude. Let's just have a tamarind shaker in there, and let's just really play this thing, And it's so much fun. And even the messiness of it still is fun. Even if you're getting off BPM a little bit, like tempo or meter for a little bit, this is church.
Right.
And we're here not to throw a concert. We're here because there's souls that need to come to the altar and say, what must I do to be saved? And if that is your motive, you have to hold everything like this.
That's great, man.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
And episode 1 and 2 were on. First one was on preparation for worship.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
Episode 2, you guys can go and listen to. We just talk about all things multi-tracks. And
Yeah.
Talk with Derek Hughes, and we talked about Ableton. Multi-tracks. And Prime and playback. Apps,
dude, love Ableton.
So many great tools out there. That are more complex with Ableton or less with some apps that you can use to enhance the quality of your band and the quality of your services. But then we go too far overboard with like this over-polished, overproduced church services that are like just like a concert or entertainment type piece. God's still part of the preparation. Even with structure, God he's still there. We have to have room to be able to stray from that.